Welcome back to the Horror Academic, and yesterday I watched Dracula Untold. It's right over here. Yep, that's a little better. So not an old movie, not a brand new movie. It's somewhere in between. This is 2014, directed by Gary Shore. I probably should have looked him up, but I didn't. Cause here's the deal. This movie had an awesome cast. I remember the trailers looked really good. I know we have a DVD of it because I know last year my husband picked it up. It was someplace because it was DVD. It was like dirt cheap. Like I'm talking like under $10. So he's like, sure, I'll check it out for that. So I caught bits and pieces when he watched, but I was kind of into going in the room, like, oh, that looks neat, but I never got to actually sit down and watch it. So I figured, let me do that. All right, so it's a really cool looking movie. I will give it that. It does take a lot of things directly in the modern vein of blending the Dracula of the original Bram Stoker story with the Vlad the Impaler, the actual figure from history. So it does a lot of that melding. This one is very heavy on that, actually. But what was strange to me, and it took me a minute to realize why it didn't feel like a Dracula film, was because it was definitely more in the vein of a fantasy adventure film, not really a horror movie, which was very odd considering it's about a guy who's a vampire. But what it looks like is that this is Legendary Pictures, who make a lot of movies I like, so I'm not busting on Legendary, branch of Universal, so they own the rights to the Universal monsters. I get all that. But what it is it's very much riding the fantasy wave. And when I say fantasy, I don't mean like, the fantasy films that we all grew up on. I mean more like the current wave post Lord of the Rings fantasy. Definitely Game of Thrones fantasy. And nothing wrong with that. Chill out, it's cool. But they even do that to the extent of casting for that audience. So this is really what drew me into this. Is I know right off the bat that from the trailers and from the cover, the guy who plays Vlad in this, let's see, Luke Evans, he was Bard in the Hobbit trilogy. And I really, even though I know I shouldn't, I really did enjoy the Hobbit series. And I say I shouldn't because it was like 3 movies where it could have probably been like a movie and a half to get everything from the book. So they embellished the story so much and added so many extra things. But I still love it. I'm a sucker for that Middle Earth realm. Weta made it so beautiful, and filming in New Zealand, just so picturesque, and it feels like you're in Middle Earth. So I was along for that ride, even though I probably shouldn't have been. But because of that, I did come to enjoy his portrayal of Bard quite well, because to me, the only portrayal of Bard is from the animated Rankin Bass cartoon, and I love the way they did Bard in there, and this is a very different way, and he gives him so much more character and makes him a whole new person, where the book, he's just kind of mentioned. So, come away a fan of this guy as an actor, so it's like, oh, cool, he's playing Dracula? That's neat. But he's playing Dracula almost like Bard, but in a more Slavic kind of setting. Also, we have the head of the Turkish army. So it's like I said, we're definitely working with the idea of who Vlad Tepes was. So he is trying to save his community of Transylvania, his village, which is a wealthy village in ways, or had been, a kingdom of sorts, and he is trying to save them from the the repeated onslaught of the Turkish armies, which has been going on for generations. So, to the point that I guess they're alluding to the fact that every king has given his son to the Turks, who uses him in the army until a certain age, and then he comes back. Oops. Sorry about that. So he's in the Turkish army, and that's when I guess he gets the Vlad the Impaler kind of moniker. So that definitely plays into it. So what I was going to say, though, is the head of the Turkish army is played by Dominic Cooper. And if any of you guys follow me online, you know I am a huge fan of the Preacher comics and the Preacher series, even though I know many people are not a fan of both. I am. And so Dominic Cooper, who is Preacher, is the head of the Turks, which was kind of cool for me because it's definitely a totally different character for him, totally different depth. I love seeing an actor do something totally different than what I know him for. So that was really cool. He did that well. As I said, this also, though, is taking it very much from the Game of Thrones world. So much, in fact, it is taking the characters of Game of Thrones. So, as Vlad had gone to the Turks when he was a child, he is trying to save his son from having the same fate. His son is played by Art Parkinson, I believe, who is the youngest Stark in Game of Thrones. And so this is the other thing that's kind of cool about this story, is it does give you the story of how Vlad is made Dracula. So you see him be sired, which I do not recall other Draculas getting into, other films of Dracula. So, but the master vampire who changes him is Charles Dance, I believe his name, and he is the head of the Lannister family in Game of Thrones. So we see this tying all together here, right? And it's very much them harkening on that audience. Like, look, you like Game of Thrones? You like Lord of the Rings? You're gonna like this version of Dracula. It's not a horror movie. It's an adventure movie. You know, it's like, it's playing on that. So I get what they're doing, but it just kind of was like, even once we really get vamps, and really once he's like drinking blood, it still doesn't ever turn into a horror film. So it's an odd choice, but I guess they're playing with the expectations of the day. 2014, yeah, we were all very much into Game of Thrones, except for me, because I didn't have cable. But you know what I mean. It was the most popular show in the country, so that makes sense. So what else do I want to say? I will say that this has very good CG. Quite outstanding CG for most sequences. I was very impressed. I am not usually a fan of CG. I think it's overused, and I think they used it quite well in this film, so that was a surprise. On that note, though, there's quite a bit of swarming of bats, and while, yeah, that's something Dracula can do, I get that, but I don't know how you can kill an entire army with a swarm of bats. They're still just bats, guys, so that I had a hard time believing. But, you know. So yeah, definitely more in line of Lord of the Rings. You know, fantasy adventure, great visuals, just like the Lord of the Rings, right? But, you know, on the good side, it's not where I was worried that it would be more of like a Van Helsing, which was a horror movie that overused CG, that was not successful to me. So I was happy that this is a film that really heavily lays into the CG, but at the same time has beautiful sets, beautiful costuming, so it doesn't fall into the trappings that I was worried about that it would with Van Helsing. But so it doesn't go there, which is good. Um, you know, the problem is though is that the movie was just okay. I guess it kind of felt I was almost going to say like felt like it was made for TV, but it didn't really feel like it was made for TV. I think we're just very high expectations of TV right now, thanks to things like HBO. But it should have been great, and it wasn't great. It was just good, which isn't a bad thing. But when you put that much time and money into a movie, you would assume it would become much better. But it wasn't as engaging as I wanted it to be, and I know I used it a lot, but it's just something that I really look for in a film. I wanted to see what happened next. I was quite impressed with things, but I didn't really care for the characters. So, which is a problem. But overall, I'm not blaming the actors on that. I think the actors did great jobs. I mean, if you like fantasy films, check it out. You know, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, then yeah, check it out. You probably dig it. I liked it, but I didn't love it. Alright, so that's fair. I liked it, but I didn't love it. That's my word on Dracula Untold. Alright, guys, I'll see you next time. Our academic out.